All right, Bijan, it's time to throw out some player comparisons for the top prospects in the 2025 NBA draft. And the way I'd like to do it this year is sort of set the criteria and think of it like this. These are boxes that each player would have to check to become a good player comparison. And the way we'll do this allows the viewer, if you're watching this, to sort of play along in your head and think, okay, who does this player remind me of? So let's begin with the projected number 1 pick in this draft, Cooper Flagg from Duke. He's a forward. He's 6'9". He's got a 7-foot wingspan. What is a skill of his that stands out to you?
It's funny that you said projected because I think it's like guaranteed that he's going to be the number 1 pick. It's just to cover all bases. But the thing I love about Cooper Flagg is that he's extremely explosive when he gets downhill, when he gets to the rim. It really reminds me of a player who can kind of get up there and it doesn't really matter how big the guy is who he's going up against because he has such great vertical ability. Already at 6'9", I think you said, with shoes. So when you get a player of that size and of that explosiveness who also just turned 18 years old back in December, I think, that's a really dangerous prospect. How about you?
Yeah, there's a lot of players in this draft who are a year younger than they usually would be because NIL is incentivizing players to classify early. I've got Cooper Flagg. His elite skill is defense. He's got about as high of a ceiling as you could have on the defensive end as a 3/4 who can essentially switch onto any kind of player. He can protect the rim. He forces a lot of turnovers. So we have the criteria. Who does that remind you of?
I really like Jason Tatum. And I know that's complimentary because Jason Tatum is one of the best players in the NBA, but Flagg kind of reminds me of him because of the fact that they have similar builds, right around 6'8", 6'9". They also have, like I said, insane explosiveness. When you get Jason Tatum downhill, it kind of reminds you of Cooper Flagg in the way that it doesn't matter if they're going up against a 7-foot center or a 6'4" shooting guard. They're going to get the better of you and at least get to the line. That's why I really like him. But what about you? What's your player comparison?
Both one-and-done guys from Duke, and Cooper Flagg has said that he studies Jason Tatum's game, at least on the offensive end. Tatum's an underrated defender, by the way.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'm honing in on the defense. I'm going to go Scottie Pippen. I know that's kind of going back to the 90s, a few generations ago, but same size, versatile defensively. Pippen's one of the best wing defenders of all time. And also Pippen was very versatile offensively. He was the size of a forward, but he played like a guard. He could also pass. At his peak, he was averaging about 7 assists per game, and that is another standout skill for Cooper Flagg. Number 2, we'll look at Dylan Harper, a guard from Rutgers. He's 6'6". He's got a 36.5-inch vertical leap. What's a standout skill of his?
It's his handle. He can get to wherever he wants on the floor because of the fact that he has such a tight, compact handle. And the thing about Rutgers this year, they had Ace Bailey too, who we're going to get to in a second, but basically it was just those two on the floor who defenses had to focus on. Harper got routinely double-teamed at the point of attack, and he was still able to either find his teammates or get past them because of how good his handle was. So when you have a guy who has that ability to handle at the point of attack and get past his first defender, it's a really good skill to have as a lead guard.
Yeah, related to that, he is elite at getting into the paint off the dribble. He's so much bigger than the average player at his position, but he's also got a really quick first step, so he's impossible to stay in front of. So now that you add it all up, who does that remind you of?
I really like James Harden. Another lofty kind of comparison. Another lefty. Yeah. That's another thing too, but like a lefty guy who can get past his first guy, also get to whatever spot he wants to on the floor. Really good shooter as well. Dylan Harper can put it in from anywhere on the floor. He's also good at drawing fouls, and I know James Harden has the foul baiter kind of mantra. Foul merchant, free throw merchant attached to him in his earlier days. He's not so much like that anymore. But I really like the comparison between the two because of the fact that anywhere on the floor, you tell Dylan Harper to go to the corner and shoot, he'll do it. Free throw line, elbow, wing, wherever you need him to go, he will get there.
Speaking of supposed free throw merchants, I'm going with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You may have heard of him. He just won the MVP award. He is the best player in the NBA at getting into the paint off the dribble. He's also the same height as Dylan Harper, so I think Dylan Harper could be similar to SGA. I don't know if he's going to win an MVP. We both mentioned MVP, so definitely a lofty comparison. Third, let's look at VJ Edgecombe of Baylor. He's a guard. He's 6'5". He's got a 38.5-inch vertical leap. What's his standout skill?
So you mentioned his vertical leap. We saw him at the Combine a couple weeks ago in Chicago. We saw him in front of us leap up and also do his shooting and agility drills. I really like the fact that his vertical athleticism is maybe the best in this class, because when you have a guy who's, 6'4", 6 something like that in shoes, when you have a guy who comes from Baylor, a school that prides itself on producing really good defensive guards, but also have that athleticism at the rim. That's an invaluable skill to have at the guard position.
Yeah, I'm going to hone in on the defense. I think he's the best perimeter defender in the draft. He averaged 2 steals per game last year. He's so fast. He's so strong. He's got great instincts. So I think he's going to be an all-defensive guard at the next level. So who does he remind you of?
I really like Derik White because Derik White's a guy who, like you said, is an amazing defender, but also he's underrated. We talked about Jason Tatum being underrated and being explosive and also being an underrated defender. Derik White, in the same way on the same Celtics team, is really explosive when he gets to the rim, too. He's had a couple of highlight reel dunks that go under the radar because of how good his teammates are, but VJ Edgecombe fits in that mold because of the fact that he has defense, he has the explosiveness. If you get him downhill going to the rim, it's a problem for the defense. But how about you?
I'm going to go with Jalen Suggs. He's about the same size, very athletic player for the Orlando Magic, is an all-defensive guard, like I think VJ Edgecombe will be. And like Edgecombe, who is going to have to develop his shooting at the next level, Suggs has done that. He's actually a pretty good three-point shooter now. So I think VJ Edgecombe could look like Jalen Suggs at the next level. All right, how about Trey Johnson of Texas? He's a guard. He's 6'6". He weighs 190 pounds.
I love Trey Johnson. I think he's maybe my favorite player in the entire class because he's just a bucket. He will score from anywhere on the floor. He was top 20 in the entire nation in D1 this year in points per game as a freshman playing in the SEC, which was the hardest conference to play in this year, which is bonkers to think about. I really like the fact that he can really score from anywhere on the floor. Also, one thing he mentioned to you at the Combine when you were interviewing him was that he's an underrated passer. It's one of his skills that he's really trying to hone, and he can find teammates on the floor because a lot of times he attracts that extra attention from the defense because of how good of a shooter he is. So he can find open teammates when the defense sags onto him. That's my favorite skill of his. But how about you?
I'll highlight his shooting. I think he might be the best shooter in this draft. At 6'6", he's really good, especially off the catch. He's excellent at moving without the ball, but I think he showed plenty of promise of shooting off the dribble as well. He said at the Combine that's something he's working on, but I think at this point in his development, he's ahead of the curve in that regard. So what's a good player comparison for Trey Johnson?
I really like a bigger version of Tyrese Maxey because you said Johnson's, I think he measured in at 6'4 3/4 with shoes.
He's like 6'6" on the court.
Yeah, on the court. And Maxey on a good day is what, 6'3", 6'4 with shoes?
Yeah, a little bit shorter.
A little shorter, but similar skill sets in the fact that they are both incredible shooters, like we said, but they also know how to pick their spots. Maxey works really well playing with also on-ball centers and wings like Tobias Harris, like Paul George, like Joel Embiid, of course. And I think Trey Johnson, when he gets to the NBA, combining that shooting with that ability to get to wherever he wants and passing is very Tyrese Maxey-esque. But what's your player?
So we're both picking all-stars. I'm going with Devin Booker, and I think Trey Johnson, like Devin Booker, can be an elite scorer at the next level and a number one scoring option on a playoff team, as Devin Booker has proven that he can be.
And he also
mentioned when the Suns make the playoffs.
Eventually, whenever that happens.
Well, I mean, they went to the finals, and he was the best scorer on that team. So
Trey Johnson said also in the same interview when you were talking to him at the Combine, he said he models his game after Devin Booker and a little bit of SGA too, who we just mentioned as a comparison for VJ Edgecombe. So something to mention there too, because when you have guys who model their game after certain players who are in the NBA, I can see them fitting into that archetype.
That's becoming a very common answer, by the way. The young guards nowadays, they want to be like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
They love it.
All right, let's talk Ace Bailey of Rutgers. He's a 6'9" wing. He's got a 7'1" wingspan. What is a skill of his that stands out to you?
So similar to what we were talking about VJ Edgecombe, it's his vertical athleticism. He can get to the rim no matter how big of a defender he's going up against. I know people were a little dismayed by his measurements at the Combine because for some reason Rutgers measured him at 6'10", and lo and behold, he's like 6'7.5", which is still very good size, but I don't know where that 2.5-inch difference came from. Either way, he's incredible at getting downhill and getting to the rim. Also, one thing I like about his mentality is that he's score first, which as a wing at that size, you don't have a ton of guys who are like that. It kind of reminds me, well, I'm not gonna give it away. I know we're gonna get there, but it reminds me of certain players in the league who aren't necessarily honed in on assists, but if you get them the ball on the wing, they can either attack the closeout or they can shoot from outside, and he had a really, really good shooting day at the Combine as well.
Yeah, I'm going to hone in on his outside shooting. He's one of the best shooters in this draft. Still has plenty of size for what he does. He's still a jumbo wing. And if his shooting translates to the next level, we know three-point shooting is at a premium nowadays. And he only shot about 35% from three last year. But when he heated up, I mean, he was unstoppable. And I think on a team with more spacing, with more talent around him, you could see that percentage be much higher at the NBA level. So what's a good player comparison for Ace Bailey?
I think it's Michael Porter Jr. of the Denver Nuggets. Not necessarily an all-star, not one of the best players in the league, but he's a guy who has a similar kind of build, similar skill set in terms of getting to the rim no matter how big of a defender they're going up against. But also, if you pass Michael Porter Jr. the ball, he's going to shoot it, okay? He's not going to pass it. He's not going to dribble his way out of it. He's going to put the ball up. Ace Bailey has that kind of archetype about him as well. And one thing that I thought when we were watching him at the Combine a couple weeks ago, his shot form is really, really smooth.
He's got perfect mechanics.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that from a guy who's 6'7.5",
right,
who, like, as we said, is better at the rim than he is from outside. But I was watching him shoot, and I was like, that's going to translate to the NBA just like it did for Michael Porter Jr. coming out of Missouri. But how about you?
100%. At his size, with the quick release, a high release point, that's going to be a tough shot to block. I'm going to go with Brandon Ingram, an all-star who adapted quickly as a scorer to the NBA level and is known, I think, in part for scoring in isolation, and that is something that we all know Ace Bailey liked to do last year at Rutgers. He was known for taking tough shots, but making tough shots. So if he can continue to make those, then it won't be a problem at the next level. All right, let's talk a local guy, Derik Queen of Maryland. Of course, he's a forward. He's 6'10". He's about 250 pounds. What's a standout skill of his?
So I like Derik Queen because of the fact that it's more intangible, but he's really, really tough. And he's a good guy to have on your team because he will galvanize the rest of the team around you. That's part of that Baltimore mentality that we've talked about with Bub Carrington and different guys who come out of that area. He's also a decent defender. I will say he probably could improve his defense at his size. Like the fact that he's 6'10", 250, you can be able to body up against centers at that size, and he hasn't really shown the ability to do that yet. I think he can definitely get there. He's also got good touch from outside. I mean, it was streaky in the tournament, his three-point shooting, but the shot is definitely there. We also watched him at the Combine. He has a pretty good release point. So I like all those combined factors, but the toughness and the dog mentality is what stands out to me.
I'll highlight his quickness for his size. He's very aggressive at attacking the rim, especially when he's around the elbow. He gets the ball, he turns around, faces up with a big man. Guys at the college level just could not stay in front of him, and I think that's going to translate at the next level because he's got great quickness and he's got great hands. He's got great touch around the basket, and we'll see if he can expand his shooting range. So how about a player comp for Derik Queen?
Another guy who's currently playing in the conference finals. I like Naz Reid of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I know Naz Reid was not a super highly recruited guy coming out of LSU in college. He got drafted, I think, somewhere in the 20s. Lo and behold, he became one of the best role players in the NBA. I think he was sixth man of the year last year, maybe 2 years ago. He's tough, just like Derik Queen is. Naz Reid is probably a better defender at his size. Like I mentioned, Derik Queen could hone in on his defense. But similar mechanics shooting from outside. They both have decent touch. If Derik Queen can mold all of those aspects together, I think he can become a Naz Reid type of player on a team that is very stacked at the guard position like the Timberwolves are.
Naz Reid's a terrific player. I think Derik Queen's a little bit taller, but what reminds me about Reid with Queen is his agility and his quickness for his size. He basically plays like a guard as the size of a power forward. I think Queen could get there. My comparison is a guy that I love, Alperen Şengün.
Never misses an opportunity to talk about Şengün. Get used to it.
I have almost all the stock that's still available for Alperen Şengün. But he's a really good player, an all-star, the best player on the 2 seed in the West, the Houston Rockets. And much like Derik Queen, he's so aggressive, he's so quick. There might be guys who are more athletic than him, who can jump higher, who are faster from baseline to baseline. But when you get in a tight space, you can't stay in front of the guy, and he's got terrific touch around the rim.
One thing you mentioned about Derik Queen a minute ago that is not my favorite thing. It's not that big of a caveat to talk about, so don't overreact. But one thing about him playing like a guard, like you mentioned, a lot of times this past season for Maryland, he caught the ball at the point of attack at the top of the key. He took a couple of dribbles, maybe a turnaround, and then he did this thing, where he took, it was kind of like a Euro step, but he did it like he held it above the defender's arms for 3 steps. I don't like the fact that he does that all the time, but that's an easily correctable thing when he gets to the next level. I do like the fact that he has that ability to have that kind of soft touch with the ball in his hand, so it's actually a good thing, but that's something that he needs to correct going to the next level. That's just something that bothered me this past season.
You know what it reminds me of is Alperen Şengün. When he was playing in Europe, I remember watching film of him and being like, yeah, it's working over there, but it's not going to work here once he goes up against bigger, more athletic players in the NBA. And lo and behold, look at him. Went 16th overall, and he is a terrific player. All right, how about Jeremiah Fears of Alabama? He's a guard. He's 6'4", and he's also very fast. He had one of the fastest three-quarter court sprints at the Combine this year.
I really liked his first step, something that we saw when he was playing for Oklahoma this past year. He's really good at getting past his first guy. He's a little bit inefficient from the field, which I don't love, but like you said, he's insanely quick. He's also really good at penetrating the lane despite not being huge. You said he's 6'4", that's in shoes, We walked by him at the combine at one point, and he only had like an inch or two above both of us. So he's a small guy, not an insane wingspan, but he's really good at using what size he does have to penetrate the lane, which is very impressive for a guy playing at Oklahoma.
I'll highlight his versatility. He's a very versatile offensive player. It's not just the scoring. He also averaged about 4 assists and 4 rebounds per game. I think that's a terrific start for a young player. And as he gets to the next level, that's what he's going to have to do to become a star, right? It's not just going to be the scoring. You're going to have to get other players involved. And if you can rebound as a guard, that's a very valuable skill. So what's a good player comp for Jeremiah Fears?
I really like Jaden Ivey of the Detroit Pistons because of the fact that they're kind of similarly built. Jaden Ivey's not a huge dude, but Jaden Ivey probably has a little bit more of a step ahead of Jeremiah Fears in terms of efficiency and in terms of pure shooting and scoring ability. But I do think that he could get to that level eventually. He does have to fix his efficiency problem. He does have to get to the lane like he has been doing at Oklahoma. But Jaden Ivey is a good person for Jeremiah Fears to model himself after because of the fact that they both have really good first steps, decently tight handle, and can shoot the ball when they need to. I just want to see that efficiency go up.
I'm going to go with Scoot Henderson. He was the 3rd overall pick a few years ago and took elite last year. I think he's going to make something of his career after a rough start. Much like Fears, Scoot Henderson came into the draft as a very athletic, dynamic driver off the dribble, but had to improve his shooting. That's something that Fears is going to have to do at the next level. All right, how about Egor Demin of BYU? He is a guard, believe it or not. Despite the fact he's 6'9", he is the tallest guard to ever test at the combine. That's either at the point guard or shooting guard position. So what stands out to you about him?
What I love about Egor Demin is that he is, for my money, easily the best passer in the draft, which coming from a 6'9", I think so. Like, I don't think it's even really close. Maybe I'm giving him a little bit of a bonus because of the fact that he's bigger. There are plenty of players in the draft who are insane passers, like Trey Johnson, I think, is a great passer.
Cooper Flagg's a good passer.
He is a really good passer. So there are plenty of players who are good passers, but I think for my money, Egor Demin, pound for pound, is probably the best passer in the draft. He's also got positional size, and if we're talking about the Wizards, that's one thing they love is a guard who has positional size. They pretty much base all of their draft decisions around that, or at least have historically. So when you combine the passing and the positional size, I think it makes for a very intriguing prospect. But what about you?
He's got really good feel as a playmaker, especially for his size. I think we view that through that lens, but he's a pretty good ball handler. I think the what he does to get to his spots and set things up for others is pretty good. He's going to have to develop his outside shooting to really maximize that skill, but I think he's got pretty rare traits as a ball handler for, again, a guard who is 6'9". So who does he remind you of?
So in terms of size and playmaking ability and passing, it's a guy who just was on the Wizards a year ago, Deni Avdija, because Deni Avdija coming out of Israel had all of those aspects about him. He was a really good playmaker, really good passer, amazing positional size. I think he's about 6'9", maybe in shoes, maybe not. I think you combine all those things, you get sort of an Egor Demin prospect. I do think that Egor Demin and Deni Avdija were both pretty raw coming out of, not college, because Deni Avdija didn't go to college, but coming out of their pre-NBA careers. Deni Avdija was a raw prospect who needed to hone his skills to become the threat that he is right now on Portland, because he had an amazing season this past year. Egor Demin fits in that mold, but who's your player comparison?
He fits in the mold of what the Wizards seem to like, by the way, with positional size. I'm going to go with Josh Giddey. Demin has a similar game. He's a tall guard, and there's similar questions about both his shooting and his defense. But, Josh Giddey has shown, I think especially this past year in Chicago, that when he can shoot the ball pretty well, he's a very effective player. And you can run your offense through a big guard like that because they have great feel, they're great passers, and it just opens things up for other players. All right, how about Khaman Maluach of Duke? One of the best big men in this draft, maybe the best big man. He's a center. He's 7'2". He's got a 7'7" wingspan. So what is one of his defining traits?
So those measurements are just off the charts, which is insane. What I love about Maluach, though, is his defense stands out first. But what I like about him is the fact he's a really, really good finisher. Like Cooper Flagg, Kon Knueppel, these guys who were on Duke, Tyrese Proctor this past year, they knew that they could just dump it off to him in the high post, and he would take care of the rest. And he did that. He's got really good touch around the rim. He's a lob threat. I remember you and I were watching the game, I think against Illinois in the tournament, where he caught 3 or 4 lobs in a row from Cooper Flagg to throw him down. Having a lob threat in the NBA is a really underrated piece of an offense, I think, especially when you run in transition. There are a lot of things that Khaman Maluach can bring to an NBA team, but his finishing offensively is what stands out to me. But what about you?
The rim protection is, I think, a big skill for him. He's going to be one of the best rim protectors in this draft class. I mean, Cooper Flagg can block shots. There's a few guys who can do it, but no one at his size. So I think if you're a team in the lottery and you're looking for a player of that archetype, then he's going to be very appealing. And when I mention his size, he's going to be one of the biggest players in the NBA. He's going to stand up next to a Mark Williams or a Rudy Gobert or a Donovan Clingan and be able to hold his own. Brook Lopez, there's not that many guys the size of Khaman Maluach, who is not only 7'2", but he's about 260. And
that's crazy.
He also reclassified to go into college early. So he's a year younger than most players at this stage. So if you just project what he could fill out to, he could legitimately be one of the largest players in the NBA. So who does he remind you of?
The guy you mentioned, Mark Williams for Charlotte, because of the fact that he's gigantic, first of all, that's what stands out. But also Mark Williams is a player whose floor is very high because of defense. Khaman Maluach
also went to Duke.
Another player who came out of that system, but his floor is high because of his defense, like Maluach. Like, even if Maluach scores 6 points a game in the NBA, he'll still be a really, really valuable player to have because of the fact that he will just swat everything that comes near him in the rim. Mark Williams also a really good finisher, like I mentioned, good touch around the rim. I think those are probably the most similar. For my money, I think that's probably my favorite player comparison that I've given so far is the Maluach, Mark Williams one, apart from maybe Trey Johnson and Tyrese Maxey. But how about you?
Mark Williams is a player, by the way, that Alex Sarr was compared to quite a bit coming into the draft, and that's a name that a lot of people are throwing out there for Maluach. So it'd be interesting if the Wizards drafted him. They'd have two guys who do some similar things. Good luck scoring at the rim against those two if they draft Maluach. I'm going to go with one of the more underrated big men in the league, Ivica Zubac of the LA Clippers. He was all defense this year. I don't think when he came into the draft, people thought he'd become an all defensive center. He was overlooked in the draft process, has become a guy who can give you like 15, 16 points per game with pretty good efficiency. And he's one of the better rim protectors in the league. He's also got the size that Maluach has. It's obviously a defining trait of his.
I got a question for you, though, because I know we've talked about two Duke guys thus far, Flagg and Maluach, and I know we're about to finish with one, too, in Kon Knueppel, but with those Duke guys, just out of curiosity, is part of the reason they are so highly touted because of the fact that they were able to do more on that Duke team? Like, Khaman Maluach, are people going to say about him, oh, he was only good because he was playing alongside Cooper Flagg and Kon Knueppel? Or is it a thing where, in a vacuum, they're still going to be really good in the NBA no matter who their teammates were in college?
I think it's probably a case-by-case basis, but that reminds me of being at the NBA Draft Combine and hearing Kon Knueppel say, because I asked him, I was like, when did you think this was possible? Sometimes I like to ask the prospects that. Like, you're sitting in this chair, you're at the NBA Draft Combine, you're an expected lottery pick. Like, when did you think that this dream could come true? And he said that it wasn't that long ago because he went to Duke and he was a pretty highly recruited player, but he didn't know he was going to play as a freshman. Then early on in the season, he started to realize, okay, I'm going to have a pretty good role. Then his shooting numbers went up, and it was sort of by the end of the year, he was like, okay, maybe I'm going to be a top 10 pick, maybe a lottery pick. So I don't think the roles were necessarily guaranteed for them. Maybe for him it was different, of course, than it was for Cooper Flagg.
Yeah.
But
I'm on the same page, I think.
But let's talk about Kon Knueppel. Of course, he's from Duke. He's a guard. He's 6'6", and he's also pretty big. He's 220 pounds. So what's a defining skill of his?
So obviously, when you think about Kon Knueppel, you think about his shooting. But what I liked about him is what he did when he couldn't shoot the ball. Because oftentimes he would catch the ball on the top of the key or on the wing or whatever. Players have to respect his shot, so they speed out and they try to guard and put a hand in his face. He's really good at attacking closeouts. That's something that a lot of NBA players learn to do over the course of their first couple of years in the league because a lot of them come in as shooters first and foremost. Then they learn, oh, I'm 6'5". I can just use my body. I'll get past them. And that's what Kon Knueppel is already doing at a way younger age than a lot of other NBA players. If you have a player who has a shot, defenders need to respect their shot, who can get around those closeouts and attack them and attack the rim. That's a huge skill to have.
But it all starts with his shooting, right? Yeah. So I got to
100%.
mention the three-point shooting. He made 40% of his threes this past year at Duke. Also 91% at the free throw line. And he is a really good shooter off the catch in particular. He said he's going to have to get better at shooting off the dribble, but I see the potential for him to do that because he was pretty good at getting to the rim and finishing around the rim, kind of like a player that you might be comparing him to, so I'll save it for you. Who does he remind you of?
I'll stop you right there because it is Corey Kispert on the Washington Wizards, another player comparison, but a bigger Corey Kispert because Kispert's what, about 6'4", something like that? Kon Knueppel's
Kispert's about the same size. He's about 6'6".
6'6",
maybe not 220.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking is because Kispert is not as broad, I think, or not as maybe meaty as Kon Knueppel is because Kon Knueppel can body his way into the lane too. But I think Kon Knueppel is probably slightly bigger than Corey Kispert. Similar skill sets though, and being able to shoot from the outside. But Kon Knueppel is way better at attacking closeouts at this stage of his career than Corey Kispert was coming out of Gonzaga, which I think bodes very well for Kon
Kispert.
Knueppel.
Also played 4 years at Gonzaga.
That too. And it took Corey Kispert, I think, probably maybe a year or two, maybe 3 in the NBA to become a really, really good attacker of the lane and getting past those closeouts. And Kon Knueppel doing those things already at age 19 is very impressive. But who's your player comparison?
My player comparison is a guy who we've been watching a lot of lately because he's in the conference finals playing for the Indiana Pacers. Aaron Nesmith, a guy who I believe began his career in Boston.
Maybe the most underrated player in the conference finals, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Came into the draft known for his shooting. He shot a ridiculous percentage in college. It was like 50% from three. But he's also got a big body, and he is relied upon to be a physical defender and take on some tough defensive assignments. And because Kon Knueppel, he might not be as cut as Aaron Nesmith, but he's got big shoulders, big arms. He's built kind of like a football player. I think he could take on some of those defensive assignments over time and not just be a shooter, similar to how Aaron Nesmith in his career has developed.
If the Pacers end up making the finals, which they probably are, and maybe winning the finals, Aaron Nesmith is a huge part of that conversation. And Duke made the Final Four because of Kon Knueppel a lot. Not only because of Cooper Flagg and Khaman Maluach, no doubt they were amazing. Kon Knueppel was the reason that Duke was able to be so efficient offensively because he was so good shooting from outside and can score on the inside as well. So two players who are probably under the radar because of the fact that they play with superstar teammates, but they're the reason they got as far as they did.
If you have a player comparison for any of these guys that came to mind as you were watching, make sure you hit us up on X/Twitter. I'm at Chase DC Sports. What's your handle?
At Bijan_Todd.
Yeah, this was fun. We might have to do it again. There'll be plenty of draft coverage leading up to draft night on June 25th. Check us out on MonumentalSportsNetwork.com and our Monumental Sports Network YouTube page. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe there if you haven't already.